For years, Richard Rawlings built his image on speed, swagger, and success. He was the loud, fearless face of Fast and Loud, the guy who seemed to live life with no breaks and no regrets. But behind the roaring engines and million-dollar builds, there were whispers that refused to go away. Rumors about his finances, his marriages, his health, and whether the man everyone thought they knew was quietly falling apart. Now, at 55, Richard Rawlings has finally stopped running from those rumors, and what he's confirmed is far more complicated than anyone expected. The image that made him famous. When Fast and Loud first hit television screens, Richard Rawlings wasn't just another car guy, he was a brand. Loud personality, fast cars, rock and roll attitude. He played the role perfectly. The risk-taker who gambled big, talked bigger, and somehow always landed on his feet. Gas Monkey Garage became more than a shop. It became a lifestyle empire. To viewers, it looked like overnight success. But Rawlings had already lived several lives before fame found him. He'd worked in sales, owned businesses, failed, rebuilt, and failed again. That grind shaped his on-screen confidence, but it also masked how fragile success could be. The show didn't just showcase cars, it sold a fantasy of endless momentum, where setbacks were temporary, and victories always came roaring back. What fans didn't see was how exhausting it was to maintain that persona. Reality TV thrives on extremes, and Richard became the extreme. Every deal had to be bigger, every argument louder, every season more intense. The pressure to stay on brand slowly blurred the line between who he was and who he was expected to be. And as the show grew, so did the expectations, from fans, from networks, and from himself. But how long can anyone keep the engine redlined before something breaks? When success started costing more than it paid. As Fast and Loud expanded, so did Richard Rawlings' empire. Gas Monkey Bar and Grill, Gas Monkey Live, merchandise, appearances, sponsorships. On the surface, it looked like unstoppable growth. But behind the scenes, expansion came with enormous financial risk, and not every gamble paid off. Several Gas Monkey ventures quietly closed or were sold off. Lawsuits surfaced. Business partnerships dissolved. Online, fans began asking uncomfortable questions. Was Richard actually struggling? Was the empire built on TV success starting to crack once the cameras weren't enough to prop it up? At the same time, Rawlings' personal life was unraveling in public. Multiple marriages, very public divorces, and emotional interviews hinted that fame hadn't brought stability. It had amplified chaos. The man who seemed fearless on screen was now openly talking about stress, regret, and the toll of always being on. For the first time, Richard wasn't denying the rumors outright. Instead, he began reframing them. Yes, mistakes were made. Yes, not every business succeeded. And yes, the lifestyle came at a cost he hadn't fully understood when he signed on. The myth of endless success was starting to fade, replaced by something far more human. But if the cracks were already showing, what finally pushed Richard Rawlings to confront the rumors head-on? The marriages, the divorces, and the truth behind them. For years, fans focused on Richard Rawlings, the businessman and TV personality. But his personal life was quietly unraveling in front of the world. Multiple marriages, each ending under intense public scrutiny, fueled speculation that something deeper was wrong. On camera, Richard brushed it off with jokes and bravado. Off camera, the reality was far heavier. Richard has since admitted that fame didn't just strain his relationships, it distorted them. Long filming schedules, constant travel, and the pressure to always be on left little room for genuine connection. Every argument risked becoming public. Every personal struggle was filtered through headlines, and social media commentary. One divorce in particular shocked fans because it seemed so sudden, but according to Richard, it wasn't sudden at all. It was the result of years of emotional distance and a lifestyle that prioritized momentum over presence. He later acknowledged that he often chose work, image, and ambition over slowing down and being emotionally available. What made things worse was how quickly the internet turned his marriages into entertainment. Speculation about infidelity, money, and hidden motives spread unchecked. Richard didn't help matters by staying silent for too long, allowing rumors to define the narrative before he ever addressed them himself. Eventually, he stopped pretending everything was fine. But admitting personal failure publicly comes with its own consequences, and Richard was about to face the most difficult reckoning of his life: burnout, regret, and the moment he almost walked away. At the height of Fast and Loud, Richard Rawlings appeared unstoppable. But behind closed doors he was exhausted, physically, mentally, and emotionally. Years of living at full throttle had taken their toll, and for the first time, he began questioning whether the success he chased was actually worth the cost. Richard has openly spoken about moments when he felt completely burned out. The pressure to keep delivering bigger builds, higher ratings, and constant drama became overwhelming. The show didn't just document his life, it consumed it. There was no off switch, no private space where he wasn't Richard Rawlings from TV. He began reflecting on missed moments, broken relationships, and the realization that money and fame couldn't replace peace. For someone who built his identity on speed and risk, slowing down felt terrifying. But continuing down the same path felt even worse. That internal conflict pushed him to confront the rumors instead of denying them. Yes, not everything worked. Yes, he made mistakes. And yes, the lifestyle nearly broke him. What fans didn't realize was that Richard wasn't just changing his narrative. He was deciding whether he even wanted to keep living it. And that raises the question no one expected him to ask out loud: why Fast and Loud really ended. For a long time, fans assumed Fast and Loud ended simply because it had run its course. Shows end, ratings change, networks move on. But the reality behind the show's conclusion was far more personal than most people realized. Richard Rawlings has acknowledged that by the later seasons, the show no longer reflected his real life. What started as a documentary-style look at his passion for cars had slowly transformed into a performance. Builds were rushed for deadlines. Conflicts were amplified for drama. The freedom that once defined Gas Monkey Garage was now buried under contracts, schedules, and expectations. The pressure wasn't just professional, it was existential. Richard found himself questioning whether he was still running a garage or just playing a character named Richard Rawlings. Decisions that once came from instinct were now filtered through what would make good television. Even moments of success felt hollow because they belonged more to the show than to him. When Fast and Loud finally ended, there was no explosive fallout or public feud. Instead, there was something quieter: relief. For the first time in years, Richard could breathe without cameras watching every move. He could rebuild at his own pace, without storylines dictating outcomes. But walking away from television didn't magically erase the consequences of years spent under the spotlight. The aftermath would force Richard to confront parts of his life he had ignored for far too long. And one of those parts involved something fans had speculated about for years: his finances. Money, mistakes, and admitting hard truths. From the outside, Richard Rawlings appeared financially untouchable. TV money, merchandise, restaurants, live venues. But behind the brand, reality was more complicated. Some Gas Monkey ventures struggled, others closed quietly. Lawsuits and business disputes surfaced, feeding rumors that Richard was in serious trouble. Rather than deny it, Richard eventually chose honesty. He admitted that expansion came too fast and in too many directions at once. Success created confidence, sometimes too much of it. Not every idea worked. Not every partnership was the right one. And while he never claimed to be broke, he acknowledged that mistakes were costly, both financially and emotionally. What made these setbacks harder was the public expectation that he should always be winning. In the world of reality TV, failure isn't just personal, it's performative. Fans expect the hero to bounce back instantly. Admitting struggle can feel like breaking character, but Richard broke character anyway. He spoke about the stress of carrying multiple businesses, the fear of letting employees down, and the humbling realization that money doesn't equal security. For someone who built his identity on independence, needing to restructure and reassess was deeply uncomfortable. Yet that discomfort marked a turning point. For the first time, Richard wasn't chasing the next big thing. He was trying to stabilize what he already had, and himself in the process. Still, there was one rumor he hadn't fully addressed, one that went beyond business and relationships, and it forced fans to ask a difficult question. Was Richard Rawlings' health quietly paying the price for the life he lived? The health scare that forced him to slow down. For years, Richard Rawlings treated his body the same way he treated his businesses: push hard, move fast, and deal with the consequences later. Late nights, constant travel, stress, alcohol, and the pressure of maintaining a public persona all became part of his daily routine. On screen, he looked energized. Off screen, the toll was quietly building. As Richard entered his 50s, he began acknowledging something he had avoided for most of his life. His health was no longer something he could ignore. He has spoken openly about realizing that the lifestyle he once celebrated was no longer sustainable. Fatigue became more constant. Stress stopped being a motivator and started becoming a threat. What made this realization hit harder was how sudden it felt. One moment, he was still chasing momentum. The next, he was forced to confront the possibility that if he didn't change, there might not be a future left to rebuild. It wasn't one dramatic medical emergency. It was the accumulation of years spent living without limits. Richard began making visible changes. He reduced drinking, shifted his daily routines, and started prioritizing rest in ways he never had before. For someone whose identity was built around being relentless, slowing down felt unnatural, almost like giving up. But this time, stopping wasn't weakness. It was survival. And as he stepped back from the chaos, another truth became impossible to ignore. Fame had reshaped not just his body, but his sense of self, confirming the rumors about walking away. For years, fans speculated that Richard Rawlings was done. Done with television. Done with chaos. Done with being the loudest person in the room. Some saw his quieter public presence as decline. Others assumed it meant failure. Richard finally confirmed what many suspected, but misunderstood. He didn't walk away because he lost everything. He walked away because he didn't want to lose himself. In interviews, he has acknowledged that stepping back from constant exposure was intentional. Fame had become intrusive. Every move was analyzed. Every decision second-guessed. The version of Richard Rawlings that existed online had little room to evolve and no room to rest. By choosing a lower profile, Richard reclaimed control over his time, his health, and his priorities. He didn't disappear. He recalibrated. He focused on fewer projects, more meaningful work, and a life that wasn't dictated by ratings or public expectation. And that confirmation changed the narrative entirely. The rumors weren't about collapse. They were about transformation. But even after confirming all of this, one question still lingered. the one fans had been asking from the very beginning. Did Richard Rawlings regret becoming the face of Fast and Loud? Or was the journey, despite everything, still worth it? Would he do it all again? As Richard Rawlings settled into a quieter rhythm, one question followed him everywhere, from interviews to fan messages to his own late-night thoughts. If he could go back, knowing everything he knows now, would he still choose Fast and Loud? For a long time, he avoided answering it directly. Not because he didn't know the answer, but because it wasn't simple. Richard has admitted that the show gave him opportunities he never could have imagined. It turned a struggling garage into a global brand. It gave him financial freedom, a platform, and a legacy that will outlive the series itself. Without Fast and Loud, Gas Monkey would never have reached the heights it did. That part he doesn't deny. But what the show also took was harder to measure. It took privacy. It took time. It took marriages that might have survived in a quieter life. It took years of peace and replaced them with constant noise, expectations, deadlines, opinions, and judgment. The version of Richard the world fell in love with was real, but it was also incomplete. And the more successful that version became, the harder it was for the real man to breathe. In recent reflections, Richard has said something that surprised many fans. He doesn't regret the journey, but he regrets how long he ignored the warning signs. He regrets believing he had to keep pushing just because people expected him to. He regrets not slowing down sooner. That honesty reframed everything. The story wasn't about a fall from grace. It was about a man learning, painfully and publicly, that success without balance eventually becomes a burden. And with that realization came a deeper question, one that no amount of money or fame could answer for him. What does success actually look like now? Redefining success at 55. At 55, Richard Rawlings no longer measures success in ratings, revenue, or recognition. Those things still matter, but they no longer define him. Today, success looks quieter. It looks like choosing projects because he wants to, not because he has to. It looks like protecting his health instead of testing its limits. It looks like waking up without a production schedule dictating his identity. Richard has said that stepping away from non-stop television forced him to rediscover who he was before the cameras arrived, before the characters solidified, before the noise drowned out instinct. That process wasn't easy. When you spend years being told who you are, silence can feel unsettling. But it was in that silence that Richard found clarity. The rumors were never really about collapse. They were about change. Fans mistook absence for failure, when in reality, it was intention. He didn't disappear because he had nothing left. He stepped back because he finally had something worth protecting. And that may be the most unexpected twist of all. The man once defined by speed chose stillness. The risk-taker chose restraint. The loudest voice in the room chose to listen. Not because he lost, but because he learned. What Richard Rawlings didn't anticipate was how deeply Fast and Loud would outlive its final episode. Even after stepping back, even after choosing a quieter life, the shadow of the show continued to follow him, not as a burden, but as a reminder of the impact it had on people far beyond Gas Monkey Garage. Fans still approach him, not asking about horsepower or TV drama, but about inspiration, about taking risks, about starting over after failure. For many viewers, Richard wasn't just entertainment. He was proof that reinvention was possible, that you could lose everything, rebuild, and still carve out a life on your own terms. And that realization changed how Richard saw his own story. He's admitted that for a long time, he underestimated the responsibility that came with being a symbol. He thought he was just building cars and chasing dreams. But somewhere along the way, he became a mirror for people stuck in their own ruts. People who saw his success as permission to try again. That understanding softened some of the regret he carried. The sacrifices were real, the costs were undeniable, but the ripple effect mattered too. Today, Richard talks less about fame and more about intention, about choosing where to put energy, about knowing when to walk away and when to lean in. He no longer needs to prove himself to an audience, because the legacy was already written, not in ratings, but in lives quietly influenced. And maybe that's the final truth behind the rumors. Richard Rawlings didn't step back because the story ended. He stepped back because the story was finally complete. So at 55, Richard Rawlings didn't confirm the rumors people expected. There was no shocking scandal, no secret downfall, no dramatic collapse behind the scenes. The truth was far more human and far more uncomfortable. He confirmed that fame isn't free, that success can become a trap, and that sometimes walking away is the strongest move you can make. The engines may not be roaring as loud as they once were, but the man behind them is still standing, wiser, slower, and more grounded than ever before. And maybe that's the part of the story we don't hear often enough. If this changed the way you see Richard Rawlings or Fast and Loud, share your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more stories about the truths hidden behind fame, fortune, and reality television, make sure to subscribe. Because sometimes the real story only begins after the cameras stop rolling.